just do one more because you've been so eagerly awaiting raising your hand. Go ahead. Right there. Oh, you're not eager anymore. Go ahead. You're ready. We're ready. This is the moment. What's your question?
At this point in past presidencies, every president, from Reagan had addressed reporters, some of them multiple times.
All of you know the president takes questions several times a week.
Those sprays, though, are not an ideal forum for us to be asking questions. He can't hear us half the time. We get maybe 2 questions and then we're shuffled out. So why hasn't he answered questions from the press at this point? Is it just that he's too busy?
I think he's answered questions, I believe the count is almost 40 times. So,
are there any discussions within the White House about reversing the policy of allowing all unaccompanied children into the United States?
No.
None at all. So, I guess, is the plan then to take in and safely and humanely find a home for an unlimited number of unaccompanied children?
And as mothers, of which I am one, I know that there are many in the room or many at home.
Well, and I'm a mom too, so I certainly feel for all of these. But, the fact remains, you have DHS projecting 117,000 unaccompanied minors by May.
For the cost of the most expensive Thanksgiving ever, that the president is going to take a few days off at a billionaire's compound in Nantucket.
Well, first I would say, I don't know if you've cooked a turkey before, but a 20-pound turkey is a pretty big turkey. I think we can all agree. They're about $1 more. I just want to be clear that there are abundance of turkeys available. They're about $1 more for a 20-pound bird, which is a huge bird if you're feeding a very big family.
The president said today that he was sent here to look out for these working and middle-class families who are strained right now. So what should they read into him leaving now at this time of great personal financial hardship for so many to go to Nantucket for the week?
And I hope everybody in here is spending time with their families. This is a time to put politics aside.
White House officials have previously said they think inflation is transitory. Is that still the view of the White House right now?
That's the view of the Federal Reserve and outside economic experts, most importantly.
President Biden, you, other members of the administration have repeatedly told Americans that wages are up, unemployment is down, the shelves are being stocked, and that the administration is working to address rising prices, including in a speech that the president gave today. So why does the White House think that its messaging isn't convincing many Americans that the economy is getting better?
The important thing for the American people to know and understand is that the president has a plan to address these issues.
Given the number of former Obama administration officials that are now in this Biden administration and the president's relatively light schedule, there's a growing perception that this is really just the third term of President Obama. What do you say to people who say that?
Who were saying that? Who's saying that?
You hear that a lot in the media.
Who in the media?
Different people.
Well,
there was lots of questions about when you had Japanese Prime Minister Suga here on the one and only so far in-person bilateral head of state meeting. It was Vice President Kamala Harris who greeted the Prime Minister. Many people found that odd. She's already taking independent one-on-one calls with key allies like Prime Minister Morrison and Justin Trudeau. So I just want to get your reaction to people who question that.
Well, it's hard to react when I don't know what people you're talking about. I will say that the president met with the prime minister, as you know, and had a full meeting, a full press conference afterwards, and they even shared a meal. Should be no surprise that the vice president is also playing an important role, engaging with and having discussions with foreign leaders.
It's more so than other vice presidents have.
How so? I'd love to see the data. If you want to present that to us.
Provide you with that sometimes, and would love to get your reaction on it.
Would welcome it.
Excellent. And then on the
Alex, you want to kick us off? Okay, go ahead, Steve. I like it.
Well,
Secretary Yellen, give her more than she needs. Go ahead.
Does the April...
Just heard you describe the infrastructure negotiations as the art of seeking common ground. At some point, does that become the art of the deal?
I don't know. You're the professional here, Peter. You're the TV star, you know? What's the Fox Chiron going to be?
What did you mean when you said that when it comes to spying on journalists, this DOJ is going to follow the Holder model? Because Eric Holder was the Attorney General when the DOJ was spying on the Associated Press and was obtaining phone records for heroes and individual journalists?
Well, the question that was asked, which was a good question, was about the records that were taken or seized or whatever, however you want to characterize it, during the last administration. And we're not going to follow the Barr model. I would say I would point you to our Department of Justice to how they will approach that issue.
You said the Holder model, and Eric Holder did monitor the phone records of journalists.
I think I would point to the Department of Justice here.
Is Vice President Harris still in charge of addressing the root causes of migration from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala?
She is, and I just announced a commitment that she's announcing this afternoon.
So then why is it that she has not spoken to the president of Guatemala since June? That's 6 months.
Well, I know that I did see this kind of strange report from the president of Guatemala saying that he has had no contact with the White House, which is inaccurate.
He didn't say the White House. He said Vice President Harris. He has not spoken to her. And if she's in charge, why is that?
Well, we have had a range of conversations, Peter, I think as reflected in our readout we put out last week with our national security advisor.
The president says that the Build Back Better is not going to add a penny to the deficit. The CBO has this new score where they assume that social programs are going to be made permanent, and in that case it would add almost $3 trillion. So does that mean that President Biden will commit that these programs are not going to be made permanent?
Well, first of all, what you're talking about here is a fake CBO score that is not based on the actual bill that anybody is voting on. This was a request by Senator Graham to score a bill that is not currently being debated. That is his prerogative to do. But what our focus is on the existing bill that will lower the deficit, that will also, over an additional 10 years, pay for the $2 trillion tax cuts that Republicans didn't pay for. They're welcome for that. About this new CBO score, it is a fake score about a bill that doesn't exist. And we should really focus on the actual bill everybody's going to vote on and considering in Congress right now. Oh. Okay. We're getting a little groovy in here. I like it. Okay. It's kind of exactly what we needed right now. It's all good. Yeah. I was enjoying it thoroughly. We should turn it back on in a few minutes. The research team are here, and members of the secretary team are here as well. So thank you for all of your work. Hardest working people in the building, some of them. Why don't you kick us off? Well, I don't want to, not them. I mean, some of the hardest working people in the building. As I was saying that, I was thinking there are other hard working people in the building. That was what's happening in my mind there. Thanks for joining with me, Ed. Okay, Josh.
Thanks, Jim.
There are a few reports from over the weekend that the vice president is unhappy. Can she expect the president's automatic endorsement if she decides to run herself in either 2024 or 2028?
Assignments, whether it is addressing the root causes of migration at the Northern Triangle. There's been a lot of reports out there, and they don't reflect his view or our experience with the vice president.
And so you guys have not heard that the vice president or key members of her staff are unhappy?
Here's what I know, Peter. I know that the president relies on the vice president for her advice, for her counsel, and that she's somebody that is a valuable member of the team, and he expects to also, you can all expect to be out there out in the...
It might be helpful if you could just tell us, what do you mean by split? What were they split between?
What's confusing about that?
Well, it's either one, they were advising that 2,500 troops should remain on the ground, or two, that someone was advising that it should be zero.
Well, again, Weijia, I think it's important for the American people to know that these conversations don't happen in black and white or like you're in the middle of a movie. I'm not going to detail those from here. They're private conversations and advice to the President of the United States. Ultimately, regardless of the advice, it's his decision. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the president. He makes decisions about what's in the national interest. Patsy, go ahead. Go ahead.
So just following up Chris's question.
Let Patsy, I just answered it.
South Africa had thousands of
Simon, I answered a question on this. Let Patsy. Simon, Simon, I answered a question on this. Let's let Patsy ask a question.
The reason you found some.
It's not effective to scream over your colleagues in here. Let's let Patsy ask a question. Law yet. Let me just finish. I'm going to let you talk. Don't worry about it. I'm going to let you talk, okay? He does not need a visit to the border to know what a mess was left by the last administration. That's his view.
Does that count as a visit? He said, I've been there before. You're saying he drove by for a few minutes. Does that count?
What is the root cause? Where are people coming from who are coming to the border, Peter?
The president said that
I'm asking you a question because I think people should understand the context.
No,
where do people
I'm asking you, why did President Biden say he has been to the border?
Do you have plans to visit the southern border?
I've been there before, and I haven't. I mean, I know it well. I guess I should go down, but the whole point of it is I haven't had a whole hell of a lot of time to get down.
Shortly after President Biden's virtual meeting with the Chinese president, her son's attorney said that he has finally divested from a Chinese investment fund controlled by state-owned entities. I was hoping you could commit to basic transparency about that transaction, including the name of the buyer, the dollar amount, and the timing. And the second question is, my colleague Miranda Devine has a new book out called The Laptop from Hell, and I was hoping that you could confirm that the laptop is indeed authentic and not Russian disinformation, as you seemed to suggest on Twitter last year.
On the first, the president's son is not an employee of the federal government, so I'd point you to his representatives. And as it relates to the book, I have neither had the time nor interest in exploring or reading the book. Go ahead, Tina.
Her son's attorney
Go ahead,
didn't
Tina.
give any
I think I answered your question. Go ahead. You can go to the representative of the person who's not an employee of the federal government. Go ahead, Tina. I think we have to move on.
It's already a pain. But is that too much for the federal government to know what's coming in and what's coming out of your bank account?
What this proposal is, as you know, but just to explain to others, is cracking down more on ensuring people are paying the taxes they should be paying on their income at the rates they should be paying them at.
The vice president said, quote, "In many ways, we are starting from scratch on something that's been raging for almost a year." Is that the best message to say that this administration started from scratch when there were indeed doses going out the door?
Well, I don't think most governors or most of the American people would tell you that they think it was handled effectively and efficiently by the prior administration.
Why is the president saying about this new variant, nobody saw it coming, nobody in the world, if that's not true?
How did you get it wrong? How did we get it wrong? Nobody saw it coming. Nobody in the whole world. Who saw it coming?
Well, first I would say that nobody knew that there would be the number of different variants. At some point coming, we didn't know what they would look like. But we've been preparing for a range of contingencies all along throughout this process.
Right when the infrastructure bill passed, you said that one of the things the president would be doing is local TV interviews.
Yeah.
I think he's only done one so far. I know that.
I would very much like that to happen. We are always competing with time on the schedule. I'm going to be honest. His schedule has been quite packed.
A handful of key aides have announced either that they are leaving the vice president's office or are reportedly going to be leaving the vice president's office soon. Is the vice president not satisfied with the staffing that she has had so far, or do people just not want to work for her anymore?
Well, Peter, I would say that working in the first year of a White House is exciting and rewarding, but it's also grueling and exhausting. It's all of those things at once. And many of the team members you're referencing, and I would just note there has been an announcement about Simone Sanders departing, but there hasn't been official announcements about others.
So this is not a case of bad headlines about the vice president and a decision being made to shake up the staff to fix an image issue.
You know, Peter, I think I spoke to it, and I would note that, and I'll just speak to Simone since I knew her before, she's going to do plenty of interesting things in the world in the future.
Does the vice president think that staff are to blame for her not making any kind of meaningful progress on the big things in her portfolio, like passing voting rights or addressing the root causes of migration?
I know the vice president is grateful to all of the staff who have served her. She also understands the excitement and the grueling nature of working.
Given what you said about the first year of the White House being so grueling, are you expecting or preparing for turnover here at the White House among senior ranks?
I don't have anything to anticipate or preview for you, just to note that in my experience is a normal course of events that
come out after a string of articles detailing dysfunction in the vice president's office. And then the director of operations put out a tweet today talking about how much he loved his job. There was a similar sort of social media push this summer following some negative headlines about ongoings in the vice president's office. Did anybody ask the deputy director to put out a positive tweet today, or was that all him?
I'm not aware of any asks for a positive tweet or a specific tweet. I would point you to the vice president's office, but I work with a number of people in the vice president's office who certainly are looking forward to continuing their jobs. Go ahead.
Build Back Better plan's price tag is being described as incomprehensible by Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat. And Lindsey Graham says that he has heard from the CBO that they're going to do an alternative cost estimate and that it's going to cost more and add more to the debt. So is there any thought around here to maybe waiting for Build Back Better until a month that you don't have this big miss in the jobs report?
There's a lot of things gathered into that question, so let me do the best I can. Let me do the best I can for you here. In terms of the report of a new CBO, that is not exactly how it works. There has been, and let me just start with the irony here, that there's an irony that a number of Republicans who forced an unpopular tax giveaway to the rich that increased our debt by $2 trillion, and certainly didn't ask for a score for a continuation of that legislation that did add to the deficit, are now asking for a score, an additional score, post this bill being concluded for something that isn't even going to be law. They're asking about a potential continuation of these components of the package that, again, the president has said he would pay for. I can't get into the psyche of why. I would suggest that it might have something to do with their opposition to raising taxes on corporations. That seems to get under their skin a little bit. CBO does not have a great deal of experience scoring components like the IRS tax savings. That's something that the former head of the CBO has also spoken to in the past, and that there are estimates about those cost savings that lead to not only our assessments of the cost and savings from the package, but the assessments by many economists.
The president, in his remarks earlier today, said talking about progress is not enough if Americans aren't seeing it, aren't effectively feeling it in their everyday lives. Why do you think that is, that Americans aren't feeling it yet? Is that a policy issue? Is it a messaging issue? What's the disconnect?
Well, I've answered versions of this questions before, but we feel the economy, and there's no question, as much as we're seeing encouraging economic data doesn't move people. I can tell you that as a communicator.
But the reason that they're saying they did that is because Lindsey Graham says if you believe these programs are going to go away after 1 or 2 years, you shouldn't have a driver's license. We all know child tax credits are not going to go away after a year. What does the White House say to that?
Well, to quote of all people Norm Ornstein at the American Enterprise Institute, who put this quite well, quote, "You can't assume programs will be extended just because Lindsey Graham wants to assure that."
Fed Chair Jerome Powell said that transitory is no longer the right way to describe inflation. He said, the administration, does the president acknowledge that inflation is more entrenched and not transitory?
Part of the point here is that it doesn't really matter what you call it, that inflation will ease over time.
I think when people hear the term well into next year, though, I interviewed a business owner today who are suffering, and they hear a term like well into next year, and they feel panicked.
I would say that we take the rise in prices and that impacts individual families, small businesses, anyone across this country incredibly seriously. While we've seen costs increase in some areas, and we've seen them move in a good direction in some areas as well. What we need to do now is think about what we're going to do about rising costs. What is our plan to address rising costs? You saw every single Republican in the House vote against Build Back Better. What were they voting against? Yes, they were voting against the president's agenda. They were also voting against lowering costs.
Yesterday, Brian talked to us for 40 minutes about lots of data points that are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, given all of those things and given what you're talking about, prices month to month moving in the right direction, what's the White House's big picture view on why so many Americans are so pessimistic about the economy and about the direction of the country? Because another data point is more and more Americans are saying wrong track on monthly polling on that key question.
Well, there are certainly Americans who look at data. I'm not suggesting that. Many of them work in New York and other places. I'm conveying that the way people experience it, I think you know what I'm saying, but the way people experience it, and the president just said this as well, is not by looking at charts in the paper. Go ahead.
On that same point, though, just politically, do these numbers make it more challenging, you think, to pass Build Back Better, given the fact that opponents and even Manchin argue that pouring more money into the economy will only make things worse?
Politically, arguing we're going to bring down the cost of childcare, we're going to bring down the cost of preschool, we're going to make affordable housing a reality. And on the other side of the aisle, you have people who are opposed to lowering that cost, is a pretty viable argument. Invaded them is you should look closely at who has a plan here and who's just shouting from a megaphone about it being a problem. We all agree it's a problem. It's who's going to do something about it.
What grade does the president give himself on his handling the economy?
I think every president I've ever worked for, I've only worked for 2, but they try not to grade themselves. But I will tell you what the president is proud of working on with Congress, with governors, with leaders across the country, is his effort to lower prices for people across the country. I would say that this is now on track, Peter, to be the largest airlift in U.S. history. And that is bringing American citizens out. It is bringing our Afghan partners out. It is bringing allies out. So no, I would not say that is anything but a success. There is a focus right now on a photo op. The president does not believe a photo op is the same as solutions. That may be a difference he has with Republicans.
But that's not what he said either. He said, I guess I should go down. So does he think that he needs a photo op? Is that what he's saying?
He doesn't. And that's a fundamental disagreement he has. I would say the former president went to the border at least once, maybe more. You may know the numbers.
About the vice president's trip, why is it then that when the vice president is asked if she has plans to visit the border, she says we've been to the border, even though she has not as vice president?
Well, as the vice president, she does speak for the actions of the people in the administration. She certainly helps oversee. I expect that sometimes she may go to the border.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
And as we understand it, though, her main focus is to try to address the root causes of migration. Did somebody decide here that it would not be helpful for her to go to the border and talk to people who just migrated here?
Well, again, I think that at some point she may go to the border. We'll see.
Has President Biden ever been to the southern border?
In his life?
Yes.
I will have to look back in my history books and check the times he's been to the southern border.
We have been looking all morning, and we cannot find any record of him visiting the border as president, vice president, senator, or even as a concerned citizen. Why would that be?
I can check and see when the last time or when he may have been.
On a question from earlier in the week, why hasn't President Biden ever visited the southern border?
What would you like him to do at the southern border, and what impact do you think that would have on the policies?
Why doesn't he want to go?
I don't think it's an issue of wanting to go. I think it's an issue of what's most constructive to address what we see as a challenging situation at the border and a broken immigration system.
Vice President Harris is visiting the border as we speak. When will President Biden visit?
I don't have anything to predict for you or preview for you. As the president has said, the vice president said back in March she'd be open to visiting the border. And if it's constructive and moves the ball forward for the president to visit it, I'm sure he may. But we come with a bunch of people, as you all know.
On the working relationship that they're expected to have with the budget director. So does the White House believe that her past statements are inflammatory?
Well, Caitlin, the president would not have nominated her if he did not think she would be an excellent OMB director.
President Biden did not have any concerns about her past statements.
I think I'll leave it at what I've said so far. Go ahead.
And the president, he said that there was going to be a new tone in Washington. Obviously, Manchin, Collins do not feel that this is a new tone. So how does the president kind of square that?
Have you asked Senator Manchin and Senator Collins about whether they think President Biden has a new tone?
Well, I think Senator Manchin and Senator Collins have said that about her tweets and her language.
And we disagree on whether she is the right choice for OMB, to lead the OMB. But that is a bit of an overstatement to suggest that anyone, and you should ask them, and unless you've had interviews with them, then please speak up and convey that to us. But they both have had regular conversations with President Biden. We look for. Let me finish. We look forward.
That's fair, but I think the question is: is the president okay with the language and rhetoric that Neera Tandem has used in direction of other members of Congress, including some Democrats and especially Republicans?
I think the fact that the president nominated her to lead the budget, to be running OMB, reflects his view that she's the right person to be in his cabinet.